Hi, welcome back to the channel. Assonation Auto World here. Today on the episode we want to look at top reasons that would make your car not to start or not to run, that will make your engine not to work. So for your engine to fire and keep running, there needs to be three things. So number one, there needs to be air. Number two, there needs to be fuel. And then number three, there needs to be spark, electricity. So let's look at these things. We will start with spark. For your car to start, you need to have battery power. You need to have at least 12 volts in your battery. So number one reason for cars not starting is a weak battery or a dying battery that is not providing sufficient voltage for the starter to turn over the engine. So how do you know your battery is dying? When you put your ignition on, you will find all the lights are not as bright as they normally are, but they are a bit weak. That is a sign of low voltage. Number two, when you try to crank your engine, you will find the revolution is not as fast as it's supposed to be. It turns over slowly. You have a weak battery. Number three, you will just have a completely dead battery that has no voltage and no lights will come on, as well as the starter will not crank. You might find just as you turn the key, only a few clicks happening, but the starter is not engaging, it's not turning over. Number two, we will move to fuel. If you have a good spark in your battery, the engine is turning over, the starter is working, but then the car is not firing, then you may be having fuel issue. So fuel issues will come in terms of, number one, you may be having a failing fuel pump that is either providing low fuel pressure or not providing pressure at all. That means not bringing fuel to the fuel injection system. So you need to check if your fuel pump is working. You need to check if you have a blockage in your air filter or replace it. You can just open one of the fuel lines that comes into your fuel injection manifold, inlet manifold, and find out whether there is some fuel coming in. Away from fuel, now you need to have electricity, the actual spark. So the power coming from your battery is converted into high voltage by use of a coil for all the ignition systems, but for the modern cars it's converted into high voltage electricity by use of ignition coil packs. So open up one of the coil packs, then as you try to crank, find out whether these coil packs are producing spark. If they're not producing spark, then you need now to find out why they're not producing spark, because you need, if you have the fuel, you have the air coming in, you need the spark to ignite the air fuel mixture that is inside your engine for things to blow up and things to happen. So you need to find out if you don't have spark. Causes for not having spark, one of it would be failure of your ignition coils. If they are too old, if they have experienced some short circuit, so they will short out and they will not be working efficiently, or they will not be producing spark at all. Number two, you may have poor or bad spark plugs that are dying or just wrong ones, so they're not producing spark, or they're not just producing enough spark for your engine to fire up and also for maximum efficiency. And number three, you may also having a problem of some of the sensors that work in conjunction with these other things for your car to run. So one on the list of those sensors is the Crankshaft position sensor. So this is a little sensor that reads gaps or a gap on your camshaft to tell the ECU the position of your camshaft in your engine. So for instance, on your camshaft there is some place where we have sort of a gear or teeth that this camshaft position sensor look at and then determine the position of the camshaft in the rotation, and then relay these to the ECU. So if the camshaft position sensor is failing or has failed, it will not be able to tell the ECU the position of the camshaft, and therefore the ECU will not allow the ignition coils to produce spark from the fear of not damaging your engine. So the camshaft position sensor will not allow your engine to fire because it is preventing the situation of your engine knocking out your valves in the event it doesn't understand where the camshaft is in relation to your crankshaft. Then the second sensor to that would be the crankshaft position sensor, sometimes known as the engine speed sensor. So what happens with this one also relays the position of the crankshaft in relation to where the valves are translated by the position of your camshaft. So why is this known as the engine position sensor? This is the same sensor that works with other electronics to relay your engine speed. This is the sensor that will relay your revolutions per minute into engine, the RPMs. So if your car is not starting up and then you find an error of a diagnosis error of engine speed sensor or crankshaft position sensor performance stroke out of range, then that is the thing. So how do you know if your crankshaft position sensor is failing? When you try to crank your car before it fires, look at your rev counter. If you crank the car and notice your rev counter is coming up a bit to probably 500 or 1000 RPM, then your crankshaft position sensor is working. Then that will allow the ECU to relay the needed signals for the coils to produce spark. If you don't see the RPM moving a bit when you crank your car, then you have a faulty crankshaft position sensor. Now, the other scenario is where you've been driving and then your car just cuts out. It doesn't start again. So several issues to that then. So you may also be running out of fuel. You may be running out of battery power as well. But the most critical one that may have come as a result of engine damage is when you have a snapped timing belt or timing chain. So how this happens is if your timing chain snaps or belt snaps, then you will have an overlap of internal components of your engine, specifically the pistons and the valves. So most of these cars nowadays, most of the cars on the market are what we call the interference engines. So the valves as well as the pistons share the same space around the combustion chamber. So the valves and the pistons do not meet at all. They don't come into contact whatsoever. So whenever you see a timing belt snapped or a chain snapped, that means the valves will either remain open or remain, if they remain open when the belt snapped, then the pistons will come and hit onto the valve. And that's where we have broken valves, either exhaust valves or inlet valves, and then your car will not run. So if you have your car running and then it cuts out suddenly, first of all, check out for fuel, check out for battery power, and then critically or lastly, check out for a snapped timing belt or timing chain. How do you know this? When your car just cuts out on the highway, and then put it to the side, call for assistance. If you get a good diagnostic tool or technician that has that, some of the errors you will see, that will be the camshaft position sensor correlation or the camshaft position sensor performance out of range. If you see that, it either points out to the very camshaft position sensor dead, or the timing belt is snapped or the chain is snapped. So the ECU is not able to tell the position of the camshaft in relation to the position of the crankshaft that will tell the position of your pistons. And those are the things that will make your car not run, and those are the things that if you look at them, then you solve the issue of a car that is not starting or a car that is not running. Yeah, so guys, that was it for the episode today. If you're new here, please like the video, comment for the things you'd want to know more about. Subscribe as well. Share it with your friends. Click on the bell icon to make sure that you're notified anytime we do a video on the channel. Thank you. Cheers.